great sea nutrients flavor for organic. God damn it. Is this thing even working? Ah! Yeah, that's working. I have to turn to some more extreme methods. Hey folks, we made it! We are on the final episode of Tom Baker's first season as the Doctor. The final episode of Series 12, Revenge of the Cybermen. Now, this episode it's an odd one, you know? It's not quite of the same caliber or vibe, I would say, as all the other episodes of this series. From the writing, to the directing, to the music and the acting. It just feels overall sloppier and more shallow. The main cast acts differently than they do in all the other stories up to this point. The bones of their relationships are there, but in a more general and exaggerated sort of way. It feels like they're still trying to figure out the dynamics here, oddly, even though at this point they'd filmed several other stories before this one. It feels like the relationships have taken a step backwards, even though we've gone through the whole season at this point, and they've gone through several life and death situations together, and should be at their closest and most trusting at this point. Instead, it seems like they're at each other's throats for most of the story.
Well, that's marvelous, isn't it? Here I am, trying to save your life, and all you can do...
The dialogue is a bit clunkier and more obvious than, say, The Ark in Space. A bit more cartoonish and goofy. Our three leads seem to be in a worse mood than usual, bickering constantly and shooting each other dirty looks with a bit more vitriol than normal.
What have I done now?
A running gag throughout the season has been the Doctor's occasional exasperation with Harry's clumsiness, but that exasperation gets dialed up to 11 here. Same with Sarah and Harry's bickering, which comes off as funny when it's just the occasional light jab or annoyance, but comes off a lot more mean-spirited in just this one story.
Harry, will you just shut up about your rotten gold?
24 carat by the looks of it.
Because of the gold that we're in this mess.
Just thinking.
Well, don't.
Come on, one more pull, it's coming.
It hurts.
Tibias, or rather fetlocks, like a cart horse.
It also feels more loose in regard to the performances of the actors. They feel like they're still testing out how they want to play their lines, like we're watching a dress rehearsal rather than the finished performance. Everyone feels like they're either overplaying or underplaying their reactions to events. Tom Baker in particular is at his most unhinged and campy in this story.
Harry Sullivan is an imbecile!
In contrast to his dryly humorous and occasionally goofy, but still measured and grounded performance of the previous stories, there are several instances of actors either stepping on each other's lines or forgetting them completely.
Well, in these past few weeks, yes.
There's
Quite
really
frequently.
nothing that can go wrong with a time ring.
You'll come with me.
Where to?
Where are we going?
To the coal mines. It's time that Voris accounted for himself.
The staging is occasionally awkward, with actors indicating too clearly that they obviously know what's about to happen, and then positioning themselves in a way that's too obvious for the setup.
This time, Doctor, it will be invincible. Cybermen function more efficiently than animal organisms.
There are several signs that this was a troubled and rushed production. In fact, the producer and script editor, Philip Hinchcliffe and Robert Holmes respectively, were not terribly pleased with the scripts they were receiving from the writer of the story, Jerry Davis. They requested numerous rewrites before eventually just handing it over wholesale to Robert Holmes to try to fix as best he could and get it more in line with the more adult, moodier, more sophisticated vibe that they were going for in this season. On top of that, this truly seems to have been a cursed production. While they were filming on location for the cave scenes in Wookiee Hole, they suffered two pretty serious accidents in the span of one day. First, an electrical engineer fell off a rock and broke his leg. Then, just a couple hours later, they attempted to film the scene of Sarah riding a tiny little motorboat across a body of water. Unfortunately, as soon as Elizabeth Sladen started up the boat, It shot off across the water and headed towards a sloping ceiling where she could have easily smashed her head and then drowned in the water. She screamed and abandoned ship, and fortunately a production crew member dove into the water immediately and rescued her. We almost lost national treasure Elizabeth Sladen to this stupid story. So that's another point against it, sorry. The script also leaves a lot to be desired. I like the idea of a double agent, secretly working for both the Vogans and the Cybermen to set a trap for them. And the concept of a fake plague being generated by sneaky robot snakes is a great premise. I also like the premise of the Vogans having an internal power struggle, debating whether it's better to live underground and safe, or on the surface, free but exposed to danger. Unfortunately, these concepts seem to be inserted more for flavor and plot-based reasons than because the writer had anything deep or meaningful to say about them. We're left unsure of what the story's point of view really is on the matter. This could be interesting in a better written story, but here, it just feels empty. There's just not a lot going on here under the surface. It almost seems to unintentionally endorse the idea of allowing greater powers to cow you into submission, where hiding is better than fighting back, which just seems very un-Doctor Who to me.
I wanted to free them from this tyranny of dark living rock. Living the way we had for generations, at least we were safe for us. Safe from the genocidal threat of the Cybermen. I had a dream. A folly conceived out of arrogance through overweening ambition.
It seems wrong-headed and poorly thought out in general. Unlike the best Doctor Who stories, it feels like the moral and philosophical dilemmas are just sitting off to the side, apart from the main story of the Cybermen, rather than organically intertwining and reinforcing the main themes of the story. Even the relatively light Sontaran experiment touches on the horrors of torture and military experimentation on people, and has a sort of poignancy to it. The supposed tragedy of Vorus's ambitions to free his people and become a great leader just kind of float by and end abruptly. It just never feels quite sophisticated enough to rise to the level of adult-oriented storytelling that the rest of the season showcases. There are several moments where characters act completely illogically, or seem to forget the stakes of the situation they're in. For example, the Doctor states that the infected man has mere minutes to live, and then proceeds to loaf around the console room, investigating and chatting with Stevenson, rather than immediately running to the man's aid. He may find essential information about the virus during this time period, but all I could think about was how he needs to immediately go and rush to this guy's aid, because he's in the care of a 20th century doctor, instead of the far more knowledgeable, hundreds of years old, alien super genius Doctor.
I've never seen anything like this before. His temperature's just shooting up and up.
When the man dies, it feels like the Doctor's fault.
If only I'd been quicker, I might have saved him.
Another example is Sarah's sudden interest in a documentary that just starts randomly playing on a monitor nearby, followed by her interest in a magazine, while she's chilling in a room where the man just died of a fast-acting and extremely infectious space plague. It's clearly just an excuse to keep her distracted so she can get bitten, and comes off very obvious and clunky. There's also this odd moment where the crewman just hands Sarah his machine gun, mere moments after meeting these mysterious strangers who just appeared on their ship.
I'll help you.
I completely understand giving them a chance to save their friend, because what the hell, might as well give it a shot. But why are you suddenly so trusting that you're willing to just hand your gun over to these strangers? Another weird moment is when the captain discovers the true nature of the plague that's wiped out 47 of his men, the Cybermats.
That's your so-called plague, Commander.
Is this thing still dangerous, Doctor?
Not anymore, but there are bound to be others around.
I describe his reaction as lightly bemused. Or how about this guy, not helping the Doctor and Harry take on the Cybermen, then jumping down after they failed and blowing himself up. A noble sacrifice to be sure, but his facial expressions during the whole ordeal make his reasoning impenetrable. Is he scared to attack, but then has a change of heart and feels the need to redeem himself? Was this the plan all along, and he's stoically awaiting his moment? Was he just confused about how the plan was supposed to go down? We'll never know, because his face registers about as much emotion as a Cyberman. There's also just all these weird little things that don't feel like they make sense, even if there is a plausible explanation buried in there somewhere. The Cyber Leader describes the 3 bombs that they strapped to the Doctor and the crewmates as
The most compact and powerful explosive devices ever invented.
He says that just 2 are enough to blow up a planet. And yet, when Lester sets one of them off, it just looks like a relatively small pillar of flame. It's enough to kill him and the Cybermen, but not enough to damage the tunnel they're in at all, or even the device the Cybermen were carrying. The Doctor and Harry aren't even knocked off their feet, even though they're standing only just a few feet away from the explosion. As for the Cybermen themselves, well, I just gotta say, I'm not very impressed. This is probably one of the least intimidating appearances of them in the entire series. It doesn't help that the Doctor seems especially unimpressed by them, delivering a constant string of disses and admittedly hilarious burns.
You've no home planet, no influence, nothing. You're just a pathetic bunch of tin soldiers skulking about the galaxy in an ancient spaceship. The trouble with Cybermen is that they've got hydraulic muscles. And of course, hydraulic brains to go with them.
It is time for us to leave.
Bye-bye.
It starts to go wrong right from the jump, as the way in which they reveal it to the audience is severely mishandled. First of all, the story is called Revenge of the Cybermen, which destroys any sort of tension or dread of who the enemy could be for the first couple of episodes before they're eventually revealed. The mysterious plague is much less mysterious when you know the Cybermen must be involved, and even less so when the Doctor immediately pegs that it's the Cybermen into the first episode, after he spots the scratches on the floor from the Cybermats.
Cybermen. That's what we're up against, Commander. Cybermen.
We then abruptly cut to the Cybermen just sitting in their spaceship, removing any sort of buildup the villains could have had. They're just here now. Later, when the ship is starting to dock, they make a big fuss out of how the ship is not responding to their hails or anything like that. It's very mysterious. I wonder who it could be. And again, here's this odd timing moment where the Doctor watches the ship docking forever and then suddenly just realizes, oh, maybe we should go lock the door so they can't get in. It's just an oddly timed thing since he knows it's the Cybermen already, so it's just another moment where they're creating artificial tension. I guess just throw it on the pile of contrived scenarios the script concocted to keep the plot moving along. The Cybermen are also just fundamentally mischaracterized. The Doctor continually refers to them as robots or machines, not once making a mention of the fact that they're actually human beings encased in machinery with their emotions stripped away.
Oh, well, I suppose we can't expect decent English from a machine.
In fact, they're portrayed here as explicitly emotional, with the Doctor using the Cyber Leader's short temper as a means to gain a temporary advantage.
And that was the end of Cybermen, except as gold-plated souvenirs that people use as hat stands.
Watch it, Doctor. I think you've riled him.
Put that down.
If there's one weapon the Doctor should never be able to use against the Cybermen, it's emotional manipulation. It makes me wonder if the writer had ever even seen a Cyberman story, as he ignores all the core elements that define them and make them unique. And then there's the music. Unlike most of the stories of that era, which featured music composed by the seasoned and capable Dudley Simpson, the production decided to switch things up for this story, in order to try to make sure that the soundtrack didn't become too repetitive and stale throughout the season. So they enlisted a different composer, Carrie Blyton, who came up with a soundtrack that was certainly different. I don't mean to diss the guy, as I do like some of the music cues here and there. The low thudding beat that plays during the sequences where the humans are walking further and further in the caves with the bomb strapped to their chest do bring an appropriate level of tension to proceedings. But then there are moments like this.
Anyone hear me? Can anyone hear
The music just seems weird and kitschy a lot of the time, with a low, pensive horn lumbering along over the action, or a single staccato drum beating a repetitive pattern over and over again, adding to the silliness of the scenes rather than doing what a good score should do, which is to paper over the dodgy effects by evoking a mood, a sense of dread and otherworldliness, which Simpson was a master of. Blyton just didn't seem to understand how to use his music to enhance the story, and instead mostly just adds to the unintentionally silly and off-kilter feeling of the scenes. To end my rant, I'll just say that the story spends far too much time recycling shots of the Cybermen walking through the tunnels and gunning down Vogans. It feels as if the story was too short and just needed to be padded out. It was kinda cool to see the Cybermen in action the first time, less so the third or fourth time, with no discernible change in the action beats or the results. There's nothing unique or dynamic about how these clashes are filmed and executed. Just slowly walk into a space, get shot at, flashy head thing, Vogans fall down, rinse and repeat. Okay, I think I've beaten up on this poor story enough now. Here's some things that I did like. I like the character of Kellman, and the actor's performance. The actor embraces his slimy persona well, effectively coming off like the arrogant, heartless bastard he's meant to portray.
You're not frightening me, Commander. You won't shoot.
But I have every right.
You can't prove a thing.
It's interesting to see a completely amoral character shifting his allegiances between the different factions constantly based on his own self-interest, working with the Vogans, the Cybermen, and the humans all at different times throughout the course of the story. The scene where the Doctor scares him is a highlight.
Stop it! Fencer, do something!
After you've been bitten, Kellman, you'll have just 10 seconds to remember where that Pentalion drive is, if you want to live.
The actors playing Vorus and Tyrum do fine in their roles. You know, they do the best they can with the shallow dialogue they're given, especially since they're buried under some extremely goofy makeup. Unfortunately, the costuming makes it hard to take them seriously. They look like sad clowns with luxurious flowing perms. I'm not a fan of this costume at all. Oh, well, there we go. I'm on the criticism train again. It's hard to avoid with this one. One fun detail is that Margaret, who I kept thinking they were calling Margaret, was played by none other than Davros himself, Michael Wisher.
You and I together, Margaret, will make it work.
Wisher seems to be having a fun time playing the old Vogan, adding a breathing issue and a cough. Although I kept thinking that that meant something and that he was going to die or be ill or something, but I guess that just means he was old.
Your plan frightened him, Boris. Sometimes it frightens me.
The other human characters are fine, but their performances don't break any new ground and often come off a little bit unpolished, as I was mentioning earlier. Captain Stevenson does get a few good moments though, and I can see a glimmer of a good performance here and there.
I've lost most of my crew in these last months, some good friends among them, yet a thing like that is still alive.
There is one genuinely cool element to the story though, and that is a special effect used to create the glowing red veins that crawl up people's necks when they're infected with the plague. This is essentially just a very clever use of reflective paint. It has a very creepy and alien appearance to it, which is appropriate for a mysterious space plague. The Cybermen also look pretty cool because, they almost always do. Their design is extremely similar to their appearance in the late 60s, specifically in the Patrick Troughton classic story, The Invasion. The piping on the arms and legs are the most discernible difference as far as I can tell, as well as swapping out the scuba pants for some slick silver bell-bottoms. Even though they're silver and thus bereft of color, their reflective surfaces nicely bounce the lights off of them, and they're put in some really nice bluish environments which give them an especially spacey and otherworldly look. However, I wouldn't have minded a slightly different look, because the Cybermen are constantly evolving throughout the entire series, and always look different in almost every appearance. It would have been cool if they had some more unique elements to set them apart for their solo 70s appearance, rather than leaning so heavily on the 60s look. They wouldn't get a glow-up again until the 1982 Peter Davison story, Earthshock. Also, I'm not a huge fan of the Cyber Leader's black earmuffs. It makes him look a little too much like he has robo hair, like some lady from the 60s who used too much hairspray. Finally, I'll say that the on-location caves are a pretty cool looking setting, and gives the story a unique aesthetic, and that touch of gritty authenticity that it so desperately needs. The way they're lit gives them an authentically otherworldly look. The space station set is also still an impressive wonder, having last been used in the Ark in space. I like how they've taken the set but redressed it to look like it's the same location but a different time period, being used for a different function. The Vogan interior sets are also nice, with lots of gold decor being organically interwoven with the exposed rock walls. They don't blend very seamlessly with the on-location shots, unfortunately, and it's one of the most noticeable changes from on-set to on-location shots in this season, I would say. Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen do have some nice back and forths, and you can tell that the actors are really warming to each other at this point.
Doctor! It's good to see you.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh. Come on, quickly.
The Doctor also has several witty one-liners sprinkled throughout, making this a fun watch in spite of its flaws.
Kellman was asked to preserve 3 animal organisms for this purpose.
Isn't it wonderful to feel needed, Commander?
So it's not a complete wash. To cap it off, I would say the final sequence where the Doctor has to try to avert the space station from crashing into the planet is appropriately tension-inducing and a pretty explosive climax to the story. The way they have the spinning wheel of chunky asteroid planet just spinning in front of the camera, very obviously, is a hilarious but also cool and creative effect that they use. So, I'm going to applaud that. And I would also say that they do have a special edition version of this episode with updated special effects. And while those do look nice, I feel like you do lose some of the charm with some of the CGI replacing the practical effects they use. So I would recommend still watching the original over the special edition for this particular story. But yeah, that's about it. That's everything I got to say about it. Overall, I have to say I did not love this story. It's not terrible, but it's also not great. And it does feel like a marked step down from the entire rest of the season. It's a shame that it's the finale as well, although it wasn't initially planned to be. Care of the Zygons was actually meant to cap off the season. And if you watch that after, it does feel like a more epic, more well-written, more appropriate finale to cap off the season, rather than this muddled runaround. This story is not a complete loss, though. It is still relatively fun and engaging, and it still features like the all-star trio of the Doctor, Sarah, and Harry. It just doesn't quite stack up to what came before or came after during this golden era of Doctor Who, where the competition is especially fierce. I give Revenge of the Cybermen a C+. And that's it. That is the finale of Tom Baker's first season as Doctor Who, Revenge of the Cybermen. We finished a full classic season of Doctor Who. That's very cool. I'm very happy about that. A little piece of my bucket list of life has been checked off. Awesome. So now that we finished the season, there's just one thing left to do, which is, of course, do a season-wide overview, wrap-up review, where I talk about what I think about the season as a whole, the pros and cons of it, how it feels in relation to the John Pertwee era versus the later seasons of Tom Baker and onward. And of course, the most important thing, which is ranking. I'm going to rank the episodes. Rank the stories. They're not episodes, they're stories. I'm going to rank the stories, all 5 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because that is incredibly fun and easy to do, putting things in a list. You love it, I love it, we all love it. Let's do that next episode. So that's it. That's all I got to say. Thank you all so much once again for sticking around and watching my Doctor Who Tom Baker reviews, or just this review if you just watched this one. I don't know if you watch the other ones, but you should. If you liked what you watched here, please remember to like and subscribe. Coming up, I'm just going to keep doing Tom Baker reviews. Just going to keep rolling through the Tom Baker era. I might divert at some point and start covering the modern era as well, but we'll see, if and when I get to that. And of course, the Shootigatwa Christmas special is coming up in just a couple months. I'm eagerly awaiting that, and I'll have a review up for that as quickly as I can get it out once that's aired. But yeah, that's about it. Stay tuned next time for the season overview, and until next time...